Hey guys, it's Vince. Today in this video we're going to be discussing a quick 10-point CNC system checklist that I've put together to help any of you wanting to get involved in CNC and not exactly knowing where to start. Many times, and it's happened to me more and more times during the week, I'm getting over inundated with questions on, hey, what do you think of this? What about this system? What's the right? What's the wrong? What do you recommend? And so on and so forth. And what I wanted to do is put together a generalized checklist, make it quick, 10 points of what you all need to know and understand before making a system purchase, whether it be for hobby or business, because honestly, guys, they cross over into one of the same. There is no such thing as I'm building a system just for hobby and then it's going to cross over into business, because that's, I mean, we have to look at what you're actually saying here. So are we to assume that a hobby system is less accurate than a professional system? That may be the case if you're going from, working with wood on the hobby system and then trying to manufacture firearms on the professional one. However, most people are not doing that. The application, as far as you working with wood one day and the next day you wanting to cross over into aluminum, is essentially the same. You still want accuracy. You may require more accuracy with aluminum, where I always tell my clients that it always makes sense to make one initial investment. If it takes you a longer period of time to save for that initial investment, do that and buy what you can afford within your budget that's going to give you that precision you require. Don't go back and rebuild and do all that if you don't have to. All that does is typically take more time, and time is, of course, money, and then the money always, of course, follows. So that being said, this particular picture in front of you is an actual Craigslist ad in my local area in Tampa Bay. A potential client of mine messaged me and had asked me, had I ever worked with this person? I have not. You can see here this was posted 2 months ago. And it was really interesting to me because I've never seen an ad like this, but when I've always discussed on this channel how many new entities of this industry are popping up. We're seeing it all over the place, In this particular picture, I think it reflects a lot, Whoever built this obviously has a lot of experience, obviously, building gaming computers. However, they truly don't understand what they're building when they're doing a CNC system. I'm going to point out one logical perspective right now. If you look, we have 3 power supplies that are powering a 3-axis system. If this person understood that he's building a 3-axis system, he would take these drives and calculate how many amps are required to run 3 drives and only use a power supply that has the sufficient amount of amps to handle all 3 drives. There is no reason to mount 3 power supplies in this series that he has here, because all that's going to do is leave your system more open as far as susceptibility to EMI. So again, this is not done correctly, aside from the fact he did the cool LED lights. Again, I do not see shielded cable being used. I don't see a grounding point here. It's kind of frightening to think that these kind of systems are popping up like this. He is using Chinese drives, I can tell you that right now. And it's frightening. I want you guys to be empowered with as much knowledge as possible to make sure that your money is safe. You guys work hard for your money. We all do. And unfortunately, this is the kind of stuff that's popping up. And the scariest part with a Craigslist ad like this, whoever contacts this guy and spends their money on whatever they're buying, we have to worry about how this guy is going to support that sale afterwards. And I tell you guys that all the time. CNC equipment will have a heritage. There is no, I'm going to buy today and I'll never need to talk to that guy again. 99.9% of you will require support in the future. That being said, a Craigslist ad like this, that whoever purchases this system, unless they're completely sound with what they're purchasing and understand the gravity of what they're dealing with, they will never most likely hear from this guy again. And I can assure you there's a 99.9% chance that whoever this is will not follow up as far as if there is a problem to make sure it's corrected. Because once they get your money, guys, I'm telling you now, it's not easy to get the support afterwards. Know who you're dealing with. So that being said, again, I can't make this stuff up. I'm going to go over right now the 10-point CNC system purchasing checklist. Overall, you can see I wanted to do this short and sweet. I recommend highly that you guys actually print this out if you're new. whoever you're looking at actually purchasing from, I don't care who it is, these actually tips will work basically across the board. Let's go over them real quick. Number one, a contact phone number to set up a time to discuss your system with the company building your system. If, again, you cannot do this, and again, this would be ideally the actual technician or engineer. If you cannot do this because the company is saying that they're too busy, they don't work that way, I've heard every type of excuse there is. Even, of course, if you're purchasing overseas, that's a no-brainer. Odds are you're going to have a language barrier. That's something that it could definitely be that's not possible. If you're purchasing in the States, if you're purchasing in Canada, everybody should be okay with you discussing the system you're looking at purchasing. If they will not set up a time around your schedule, I say beware, because then they're either too big to support their business or they're not looking at that level of support down the road, because 9 out of 10 of you, once again, will require a level of support after the sale, and every vendor should be looking at that even prior to it. So again, that speaks highly of who you're working with, and I say proceed with caution if you cannot set up a phone consultation. I do it all the time. I recommend doing it because, number one, it's faster for me as a vendor, and I give you exactly what you need. We can discuss your applications and make sure your money is well spent where it needs to be. Excuse me. Point number two, if shopping from a website, you should review the date code for its creation. Be cautious of same-year date codes. Every website will have a copyright date or a date of when the actual site went live. Review that date code if you plan on shopping from the website. A lot of these sites are just popping up. If they pop up within, in the last 6 months, the last year, odds are they're not as established, and typically, and I've seen this so many times, that they do not have contact information. They will have an email address only. You have no idea who you're dealing with. If you do a Google search on that company, you may find actual representation of who's purchased from you. You may not. There may not be any record whatsoever. Be cautious. I always recommend, if you're uncertain of an actual system, again, due to the fact that a website is lacking information, contact the vendor, see if they will schedule that phone call to discuss the system. If it's a real person, they should. You can also find out if they're selling whole chassis, and I get this question all the time. If you're selling a whole chassis, odds are it's not going to be one guy. Okay, if it is one guy, it's going to be shocking because there's a lot that goes involved with selling an entire chassis. For one guy to be doing all that work is not completely logical in a business sense. So odds are there should be a multitude of people he's working with. If you're talking to a one-man show and he's telling you he's selling you an integrated system and it's the chassis and the controller and everything else, be careful. Ask all the questions once again in this list. Do not cut corners. Number 3, review all service fees on a pre-configured system, as many are hidden. Speak directly to someone who provide accurate pricing for service tech support hours in writing you may require. Okay, so again, I get this question a lot. What's the average fee for tech support? Well, depends on what we're talking about. I'm a mechanic, once again, working on a car without it in front of me. You tell me what you require or what the system is doing, and the more explicit you are with me, meaning I want clarity in multimedia aspects, I want pictures, videos, I need complete, utter detail, how the system is wired, what kind of cable, what components you're using, the types of motors, the brands, everything correlates. Every detail with these systems have to be matched in my mind so I know how to actually analyze the system. I cannot emphasize that enough. If you speak to someone and they say, well, hours for support could be this, as far as pricing, you need to cover that explicitly to what exactly you require, because a lot of times what tends to happen, and I've had this happen with previous clients, as far as past experiences with who they've worked with, they'll have trouble getting those actual quotes in writing, and then what ends up happening is they fluctuate. You do not want to deal with that, okay? Service and support can go anywhere up to $150, $200 an hour for engineering. If it's general support, it can be $40 to $80 an hour. For me in general, it's usually about $80 an hour from doing engineering type support on a machine. Again, if it's something I have not built, I'm always open to help with general questions. If I have to get into engineering, hey, this motor is not doing this. What do you think this is? Well, naturally, that's not a general question. I need to then go into full detail on your system so I know once again what I'm working with, and that will take more time, and therefore you will be charged for that. Okay. Number 4, find out if all your required support is included with the price you were quoted. Once again, required support. I've dealt with previous clients where they've purchased a system from somewhere and they were assuming that the system that they were purchasing, they were going to get after sale support in regards to software setup, software configuration, part configuration. I've had all kinds of interesting issues with this, and I cannot emphasize this enough, guys. You need to cover this question explicitly. You want to know if they cover all the support you require, meaning if you're not up to par mentally with this task of learning the CAD/CAM software, understanding how Mach 3 or your motion control software works, understanding how the system works, you need to let them know, hey, is this included or am I going to have to pay for this? And if I am, once again, we're going to go back to number 3. What kind of price are we looking at? You should be documenting every one of these questions. I cannot emphasize that enough. All these answers should be written. Number 5, find out explicit component details of the build you're being quoted on. This means everything from the drive's manufacturer, the wire and cable used to assemble the system, the warranty status of these components, the size of the enclosure being used, and any required accessories you intend on having installed. Again, you want explicit detail. Any vendor that is in this business to make you happy, they're going to give you that information. And if they're proud to use the components they're using, they're certainly going to stand by, providing you all that information. And honestly, if someone contacted me that way, I'm excited to tell them, because to me, it's like, look, you care enough to ask. Most of them should want that. They should want you to care enough to ask. And if you do ask and they don't care enough to ask, they're going to realize real quick that you obviously are trying to either learn or you already know what you're looking at for being that detail driven to ask these questions. So again, ask the questions, document everything. Your drive manufacturer, very, very important. If it's a Chinese manufacturer, what kind of warranty you get? If it's not lead shine or mainstream Asian-based drive system, what kind of warranty are you getting? What kind of support are you getting? If you're getting a drive that is from China, are they the only ones that are going to support that drive? Or is it going to be someone, again, that has a company that represents this drive that you can contact? That you're getting real engineering support from. You don't want to be dealing with Joe Blow behind the counter who you call, like many of these internet companies. You call one day at 10 o'clock and then you call back the next day at 10 o'clock and you're speaking to someone different and they don't know where you're at. Again, this is the difference between understanding what you're paying for. That's why I'm really highlighting all these. Document it all. Number 6. If you're purchasing a chassis from a vendor, follow the same directions given in point 5. Cover the chassis transmission type. That means belt drive, rack and pinion, lead screw or ball screw. I still talk to many potential clients, and when I bring up whatever they're discussing as far as a machine they're interested in, I say what transmission are you using? They don't know. Okay, you want to know what kind of transmission automates the robot, and that's all a transmission does is it provides automation, no different than your car. So again, we want to know if it's using belt drive, which is going to be the least acceptable in sense of load. I'm going to tell you that right now. Belt drive is fine for a plasma system. I do not recommend, and I've said this numerous times, a belt drive for general machining. There are exceptions to this rule. And when I say exceptions, because I've had guys ask me, what about a brand like THK or NSK? If you're going to that level, they're at a totally different realm than if you're dealing with, many of the I'll say the lower hobbyist, 3D printer type grade that's out there as far as belt drive systems. Again, common sense prevails. If you're buying a THK belt drive system, many of them are used in like MRI hospitals, MRI machines in hospitals. those machines are totally different as far as their longevity and, again, their accuracy. That's what they're designed for. So again, if you're dropping, those will be easily 4,000 to 5,000 a unit. If you're dropping that kind of money, you can rest assured you're getting a quality system. Many of you buying a belt drive, you're not looking at spending that kind of money. You're looking at the easiest and most economical way to automate your robot. Belt drive should, once again, only be used in a general practice for low load machines, and that means plasma cutting. Wood is probably going to be okay. I would just be very cautious because belts over time will expand, and as a belt expands, there goes all your tolerance. So be very careful with that if you are using it under a load. Rack and pinion, once again, real basic transmission. We have a gear on the motor then engages the transmission, and the transmission is nothing but a long rack, and there you go. That's your way you're going to automate the machine. Very basic, relatively cheap. Once again, not the best transmission overall for doing a loaded machine. And when I say loaded, I'm talking anything in the realm of hardwoods. I would say softwoods, you're probably going to be okay. Hardwoods, you're going to find that over time, you're going to have problems with that as far as accuracy, because the tolerance level on 98% of the rack and pinion systems that are out, unless you're purchasing from the right vendor, and the right vendor would be like McMaster Carr, their tolerance are not going to hold up because we're dealing with a lot of inaccuracies on the rack itself. Okay, there are machining inaccuracies that are not going to be avoided, and over time, a loaded system is going to usually give you more issues by far than a lead screw or ball screw. That being said, what systems are best used with this? Once again, plasma systems. Again, very low, light residual load. That's what we're looking for. Of course, 3D printers use weird things like this. Again, it's just a question of which way they want to go to keep that budget where it needs to be. And a lot of times, potential clients bring this to my attention because that's the first thing they look at. It's cheap. They're investing all their money in making the system as rigid as possible, but then they're trying to nickel and dime what transmission to use. The transmission is the heart of the machine, guys. Find out every detail. If you're looking at buying from a vendor, you want to know what transmission is being used by your machine. Your vendor should also be asking what application you plan on using the machine for. You do not want to be using a belt drive machine on, again, machining aluminum or steel. That's just crazy. Again, I guarantee you if you were using a belt drive, they're most likely not using a THK or NSK rail system. So again, if they are, you're going to see that chassis go enormous in price, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. This is average for those systems. So again, be logical. Ask every detailed question that I'm putting out here, but transmission, without a doubt, you need to cover. And if they're being as receptive to you covering it with them, they will want to know your applications. And rack and pinion belt drive, very low load. That's what we're looking for. Let's go over to lead screw, ball screw. If it's using a lead screw or ball screw, lead screw is okay. That's where they're kind of manufacturers usually stepping up their game as far as increasing the price of the system. They'll usually use like an Acme nut where they're trying to take out backlash, which just more or less removes play from the ball nut. Definitely a difference from a lead screw and a ball screw. Ball screws are precision, guys. They have different precision ratings. They'll start at C0, go all the way up to usually C7. They could probably go up. I think I've seen them. The highest I've seen is like C9. Honestly, I wouldn't recommend anything past a C7. C7 for general system applications is fine. And usually it's about 0.03 of an inch inaccuracy per 12 inches of movement, which for general machining is going to give you the accuracy you're looking at, especially when we combine that with a micro-stepping quality drive. So just keep that in mind. Once again, the accuracy of the machine is based on your specific applications. I cannot emphasize that enough. A vendor who understands what they're selling will base that machine, if they're selling an integrated chassis, on exactly what their client's applications are. If you go to contact them and they once again give you a runaround, oh, well, yeah, that'll be fine. Real open, real flatline answer. They're not going into detail about, what you're discussing, I would be cautious. I would ask more questions and make sure you get what you pay for. The worst thing you can do, and I've had a lot of past clients go through this with vendors, is they buy a machine thinking, yeah, it's going to work great, and then they get it and they realize, oh, I have to upgrade this, then I have to upgrade my couplers, and I have to upgrade the ball screws and the linear rails. You don't want to do that. And if you do want to do that, you're better off just building your machine yourself, because it'll save you a lot less headache, and of course a lot more time you'll save, and time equates to money, as we know. Okay, so let's cover point 7. Cover the way the system will be controlled based on your budget, price, and preference. Will it use a parallel port DB25 cable, USB, or Ethernet interface? Does it support Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10? Does it support Windows 32-bit or 64-bit operating systems? Each interface will have stipulations, and you must have a thorough understanding of each one's attributes and limitations based on the intended PC to be used to control your system. Guys, think about that. The PC you're using to control the system is the neurological center. I've said it numerous times. That's where everything starts. Okay, that's where the signals generate from. That's where your programming is generating from. You want to make sure you pick the right interface for what you're using. I always recommend finding out from any vendor how they're going to enable you to control the system. If it's using a parallel port, that's fine. Realize if it's using a DB25 parallel port for communication, you will require a Mach 3 based, you will require a Windows XP 32-bit based operating system. You can use Windows 7 in certain aspects when you step up to a USB format. I do not recommend using Windows 7 with a DB25. Now I know, and it's been brought to my attention many times, that Artsoft now states on their website you can use Windows 7 with a patch. I've had kind of a 50-50 aspect with that, because I've had past clients have issues with it. Some do, some don't. None of them have issues with XP. So I say, why make a problem that doesn't have to exist? If you're going to go DB25 parallel port, which again, we're staying at the low end of the, or I should say at the high end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, as far as when that hardware was considered, relative, then I would stay with Windows XP. Keep in mind, Windows XP is no longer supported by Microsoft. As a matter of fact, Windows 7 is now actually being no longer supported by Microsoft, I believe at the end of the year. I'm not certain about that, but again, do your own homework on that. You'll see. I highly recommend staying within a budget that gives you the latest choices of operating system. You want it to be user-friendly. The last thing you want to do is deal with, trying to find support for drivers or, out-of-date hardware. If you don't have to do that, and you don't have to use Windows XP because of budget and a DB25 parallel port cable because of budget, go with USB or Ethernet. Now, as far as USB and Ethernet, which is better? I always say it depends on your budget, and it depends on your understanding of each. USB is excellent considering your machine is properly grounded, just like all the rest of them, whether you're using DB25 or Ethernet. You want the machine properly grounded, and you want to make sure that we don't have floating ground issues, because again, if you do have a floating ground issue, and some clients have had that, if you're using a laptop, it's very common, you will require a data isolator. That's why I came out with the CNC vest. It rectifies the problem by isolating the unit's ground, and meaning a UC100's ground, so that it's not going to be actually affected by any voltage fluctuations from your laptop's ground, which again, laptops being there's no real direct connection to a ground, they can fluctuate. It's very, very common. Actually, most PCs have floating ground. So again, keep that in mind. Ethernet's the most costly of all of them. Ethernet gives you a variable to actually run your system at up to 100 foot in length from the actual controller itself. So again, very cool if you have a shop and you want to have your actual computer in an air-conditioned base, and then have your system in an air-conditioned base but away from the PC. You can't beat that. That's definitely going to be the way to go. It costs more, and USB would be in the medium aspect of cost, of course, parallel port being the lowest end. However, you will know that USB and Ethernet both allow you to use Windows 7 through 10 and 32-bit and 64-bit operating systems. So again, latest technology, most users support that way. Ethernet, let me just cover one more question that always comes up. I've been asked about the Centroid Acorn unit numerous times. The Centroid Acorn is more or less an Ethernet smooth stepper with integrated software. That's really all it is. I really don't see it as a remarkable piece of hardware in the sense that, you know, it's taking everything to a next level. What really I think a lot of guys like is the fact that the integrated software is much easier to use. That being said, be careful, and one of these actual, I discussed that, be careful, as a matter of fact, on point 8, be careful when vendors bundle software with hardware. When they make it proprietary, there's a reason. Remember that. There's nothing free in this industry, especially when it comes to engineering. They know 98% of you, 99%, are going to be using this unit to make money with, okay? That being said, they also realize that, and the Centroid is known for this, you can review it yourself on their site, that the unit itself has stipulations with the bundled motion control software it comes with. You have to buy the Pro version to have an unlimited G-code limit. Otherwise, you're at a G-code limit. If you go to hit that limit, you can't machine anymore. At that limit, you'll have to purchase the Pro software. So again, there's stipulations. Understand everything. The Acorn unit also charges $90 an hour for support. Okay, these are validated. You can go on their site, Centroid site, and validate it yourself under the Acorn. Be careful. I always prefer open source. Open source components means that you simply buy the unit. You're not going to be charged, you know, extravagantly that way. If you have to call tech support or get in touch, Warp 9's been around forever, and the Ethernet Smooth Stepper, I can tell you right now, is manufactured in the U.S. as well. They will answer your questions. However, most of you will find that if you just do an open Google search, because of the maturity of the hardware I've chosen, you're going to get the answer to the question you have, because many people have already had it. And that's what I always look at. You want something that's user-friendly and simple but gets the job done efficiently. To me, that's the most important. So number 8, of course, discuss what motion control software the system will support. Be careful with proprietary software for hidden fees and limitations. Review all hardware bundled software limitations very carefully. I cannot tell you how many times previous clients who have purchased hardware from other vendors have bought because they said, hey, you know what, this is what you need. They buy it, and then they find out there's these hidden limitations. Even with CAM software, you got to be real careful, guys. There's sometimes yearly update fees they'll make you charge, or they'll charge you for. You really want to know every penny you're going to spend, especially if you're starting a business. You need to know when you're going to be in black ink. You know, I mean, I cannot emphasize that enough. There has to be a point that you pay very, very close attention to your numbers and who you're working with. Because like I said, this is a legacy. You're not looking at working with somebody for a day or just for this purchase. You're going to be linked to that person or company, and you want to make sure that they're going to be there supporting whatever they're selling you, and they're not consistently weaning you on stuff that the system should have originally come with to begin with. I can't emphasize that enough. Number 9, review payment processors accepted for payment of the system. Credit cards, PayPal, eBay, and Amazon are the most recognized that offer buyer protection. Never pay with a cashier's check or cash unless you understand the gravity of the purchase you're making. I cannot emphasize that enough. I get told this all the time. I had 2 clients last week tell me that they've bought hardware from vendors where they requested that they pay in a cashier's check only. That is a huge red flag, guys. Huge red flag. And unfortunately, when you guys get taken advantage of that way, there's very little that can be done to protect you. Okay? If you stay with a credit card, stay with PayPal, eBay, or Amazon, you're always going to be fine. Even if you purchase overseas through these companies, you will be fine, pending you follow the stipulations that are outlined in order to do so. If you're unaware of those stipulations, do not buy. It's simple. You know, be aware of what you need to understand before spending that kind of money. None of these systems are cheap. Even if you're buying a Chinese-based system, you're still looking usually a couple $1,000s at the minimum. So be aware of what you're spending. Be aware of who you're working with at all costs, and including, of course, the payment methods for what you're purchasing. Number 10, and the final one. If you're purchasing a system Make sure all the above questions have been answered and request a written document of all the above. There is no reason that whoever you speak to will not provide you a quote, discuss with you whatever components you've asked about, as far as links, videos, whatever it may be. If it's proprietary software and you're still interested, they should be willing to say, hey, here you go, take it for a test drive, do this, do that. Here's some example projects, whatever it may be. They're going to want to prove that their stuff is right. I mean, that this is a good fit for you. If they won't do that and they won't forward you, an actual invoice, here, check this out. Does this make sense? If it makes sense, we'll move forward. If not, let me know. I mean, I can't tell you how many times guys say they'll talk to somebody, then they'll call back, and it's like I said, it's like that internet game, and I'm just using that actual industry as a standard because it seems to be really rampant there, where you call, you'll get support one day from whoever, the next day you call and you don't know who you're speaking with, and then you have to start this whole process over again, and your time is valuable. They should value you as a client. And that being said, they should take the time to give you a written document. I always recommend requesting it. I do it by nature because of, again, who I've worked for in the past. That's always been a prerequisite. If whoever you're speaking to will not do it, or don't, I should say, whoever you're speaking to, don't take for granted that they will do it, I recommend always requesting it. You want something to reiterate what you've gone over and also to correlate with the notes that you've taken, because once again, the video is one thing that I'm making for you to use. I highly recommend taking a screenshot and printing it out so you can use this outline to speak and get the exact answers you need. This way you guys are as protected as possible. I can't be there with all of you. I can't answer all the questions at once, but if you utilize this outline, you'll be good. And then at least then when you do find in your area that you find a guy like this, you'll know the questions to ask. Because I can tell you, like I said right now, if you ask them, why'd you use 3 power supplies? I mean, I get guys all the time to ask. Matter of fact, that comes up weekly. How many power supplies do I need? And I always tell you, everybody, always utilize a single power supply. Okay, there is no reason to use more than one power supply unless your amperage that the single power supply you have isn't enough to support the amount of drives you're using. Okay, but if it is, then you only need one. This is either one of two things right here. It's either a lack of knowledge in the sense of how many amps are required from these drives, in which case you wouldn't want them working on your system, or he's trying to have you spend more money than is required because you're purchasing more components than is required because, once again, of lack of knowledge. So, once again, once you guys know what to look for and the more this makes sense, it's logical, go over it, take your time. If you guys have any questions, once again, I'm there. I'm just doing this because, again, I'm getting over inundated with more and more questions. Everybody's wanting to get involved, and that's great. I know you guys want to make the right choice. There's, like I said, everybody's hard-earned money's at stake. Ask these questions, go over them carefully, and I guarantee you guys will be on the right track. Once again, if you guys have to contact me with questions or quotes, my email directly is storm2313@gmail.com. You can also contact me through my eBay store, eDealers Direct. I'll put that in the description below. To my subscribers, guys, we are growing rampantly, and I am so thankful. I've got some really, really cool things I'm about to release. I know many of you requested the parts that I'm about to release, so stay tuned for that. I will be covering shortly. I'm just trying to figure out the time span of how to start doing marketing for your components. Whatever you're trying to create for your business, I know a lot of questions I'm getting asked is that, you guys have products, you have ideas, you've already engineered them, you've got them dialed in, but you need marketing strategies to get them out there, and I will be discussing that in near future videos, so stay tuned. Thank you all for your support. Take care.